We're here this afternoon to talk about the S&P rating that was just released not long ago and what it means for the city. So without further ado, I will turn this over to Mayor Mike Duggan.
All right, so in another lesson in the way the world works, when the city was in financial trouble, we were mobbed on the sidewalks outside of the federal courthouse with TV cameras. But when the finances improve dramatically, the level of interest is a lot lower. So I think it's good news probably that we're becoming boring. But for the city of Detroit, this is an enormously important day. We have been grinding our way out of this financial hole a day at a time. And I have with me John Hill, our Chief Financial Officer, and John Naglick, his Chief Deputy and the Finance Director. Some of you here were in court when I testified, and there had been a proposal from the consultants to set the exit financing at $325 million. And Mr. Hill and I very strongly felt the city did not want to be borrowing any more than we had to. And while the initial authority from the emergency manager in the court was to borrow $325 million, when we exited bankruptcy on December 10th, we got that borrowing down to $275 million, which was huge for the taxpayers to borrow $50 million less. And the other thing that happened is Judge Rhodes was good enough at the end of the bankruptcy trial to make me a party to the mediation relative to the consultant fees, which I thought were extraordinarily high. In the course of those very tense discussions, we reduced the consultant fees by $30 million, and we owe an enormous debt to Judge Jerry Rosen, who facilitated that. And so we knew we were $30 million better off. We finished fiscal year 2015 on June 30th. We finished with a balanced budget, which meant we could take the $30 million in savings from the consultant fees and essentially pay the first $30 million of the borrowing. And so Barclays loaned us the $275 million. Barclays is in the process of selling those bonds to the public. We just redeemed the first $30 million. So now we only owe $245 million. And so as Barclays goes to sell those bonds to investors and the public, Detroit is on the hook for the interest rate. As we began to assess it, Mr. Hill indicated to me that there was a technical glitch in the law relative to being able to pledge income tax revenues so that the investors were confident the income tax revenues would actually go to pay the bonds. There had been precedent in the Public Lighting Authority and a number of other local government entities to allow the creditors to be able to lay claim to those taxes as soon as the taxpayer owed them. And so I approached Governor Snyder, the Detroit leadership in the House, and Speaker Cotter and Senator Meekhoff in February. Senator Boer sponsored the bill. Lisa House led the effort on our part. Within 60 days, that bill passed overwhelmingly in the House and the Senate and became Public Act 17 of this year. As a result of that act, we are very pleased today that our exit financing has been given an A rating, an investment-grade credit rating, by Standard & Poor's. And I have to say, if you had said 6 months ago there was any chance the city of Detroit could do a borrowing with an investment-grade credit rating, people would have thought that that was very unlikely. But it gives you an indication of how far we've come in a short period of time. The other thing is we hopefully have passed out to you a 3-page fact sheet. Did we pass it out? Okay, and so what that fact sheet basically shows you is this. On the general obligation bonds, on the limited tax obligation bonds, those bonds that are already outstanding, Detroit's credit rating dropped 10 notches from 2008 to 2013. That's pretty much unheard of, but we went from a triple B minus in 2008 to a D, which is the lowest rating Standard & Poor's has, in June of 13. Today, Standard & Poor's rated those limited tax obligation bonds, the bonds that are already out there, as a B minus. They jumped us 6 steps in the credit rating of our outstanding bonds in a single day. And so There have been, it seemed like year after year, all you heard of was bigger deficits and declining credit ratings. Today, what you have is a balanced budget, less borrowing, lower interest price, and a 6-step jump in our credit rating. And so the people who have been driving this effort have been in our finance department, and with that, I want to congratulate and introduce our Chief Financial Officer, who was appropriately last week named Crane's Chief Financial Officer of the Year, John Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And the mayor did such a great job giving you the details of the transaction. Let me just state one thing that I'd like to add to that, and that not only do you see the ratings, but you also see an outlook, which I think is also important. In the past, the Detroit's outlook has not been stable. Standard & Poor's in both ratings indicates that we have a stable outlook, which means that the city is no longer on the decline, but that we're stable. And we hope that in the very near future, that outlook will be increasing as well. So that's a really good sign for us. And I think if we can open it up for any questions that you have. Also, John Naglick is here and can answer any detailed questions.
Without any immediate plans for a bond issue, what exactly does the rating mean for the city?
Well, I mean, we have immediate plans, obviously, for the exit financing because that.
Yeah, with that withstanding.
Well, I mean, it certainly means that there is an outside independent party who has looked at our finances and has looked at the bond issuance that we have outstanding and the one that we're about to go forward with, and has said that there's been improvement in the finances and also improvement, certainly, from our outlook being stable. So I think that it does give some confidence that the city is improving and that we have turned the corner with respect to those ratings. There's no plan right now for us to enter the market other than this particular financing. However, at some point in the future, as we move forward, we will certainly be interested in entering the market. And so people will see a trend of improvement from where we were before. And so it's a really good benchmark for us to look at all future improvement on.
What indications do you have for the rating being based on what's happened since the bankruptcy? And like, if it had been issued the day that the plan of adjustment was confirmed, what's been the difference in what it would have been there and what it is now?
Well, it's really hard to tell what rating they would have given. I think that's why it's important to look at what they say in terms of stable being an outlook for us going forward. They also do talk specifically in the rating about actions that have been taken by the city, particularly actions with respect to our financial management and also our management overall, and have indicated that there are considerable improvement there as well. And so I think as you read the rating, you'll see some very good signs there.
Sandra, the other thing I would add is that, sorry. Sandra, the other thing I would add is this rating should save us significant interest expense. By achieving the investment grade rating, when these bonds are sold to the public on August 19th, that will fix the interest rate, and those sophisticated investors look to this underlying rating to determine what interest rate they'll accept. So it saves us $2.5 million annually, and $20 million over the life of the bond issue is what we believe the savings will be.
Based on the $30 million reduction from the fees?
No, based on the lower interest rate as a result of an investment grade rating. So at the effective date, as the mayor indicated, Barclays loaned us this money. This loan right now sits on Barclays' balance sheet. We pay them a variable interest rate, and once they're sold to the public, the city's interest rate will be fixed. So this rating was a real milestone because investors will look to that, and we hope we'll feel confident that the bonds are secure, and on August 19th, we'll get better pricing that our estimate is $2.5 million a year or $20 million over the life of the bond.
The one other important point there is that if we were not investment grade, there would be certain investors who could not even consider investing in this product. And so therefore, this means that the pool of investors and then the likely interest in this particular piece of paper will be much greater than it would have been otherwise. And therefore, we have a potential of having a much lower interest rate as a result.
And we're going to New York to sell these bonds.
We are.
When are we going?
It is in 2 weeks, about 2 weeks.
So we're going to actively market these.
Here and also in New York.
John, given that, a lot of the, neighboring communities, counties, and the state have far significantly higher ratings than Detroit, I mean, we've still got a ways to go, but I don't want to downplay what happened today, but it's.
If we didn't have a long way to go, I'd be running a hospital system right now. We understand.
Well, and I think the important point too is that, remember, we just came out of bankruptcy, and to have this kind of progress so quickly out of bankruptcy obviously indicates that there's certainly confidence that we're going in the right direction. So I think that's important as well.
The keyword stability, right?
Right.
Just a few months out of bankruptcy to have stability.
The stable rating.
And the interest rate is specifically set when they're sold, or do we have no chance of that?
Yeah, it is set when they're sold.
On the sale date, okay.
So-
What's your marketing campaign going to be like?
Do you want to speak to that,
Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor?
You guys, I'm going wherever you tell me.
Well, we're having two places that we'll be going, actually here in Detroit as well as in New York. And what we will be talking about as much as we can, certainly we'll be talking about this particular credit, but I think we'll also be talking about the future and some of the things that the city is already doing. I mean, clearly, if you look at the service delivery under Mayor Duggan versus before the mayor came in, you'd see huge improvements in service delivery and huge improvements in the quality of life for the citizens. There's no question that we have a long way to go, and as the mayor said, we wouldn't all be here if we didn't have a long way to go. But certainly we will be able to show the progress that we have made and that we're putting in new systems, restructuring the Office of the CFO in order to do the types of foundational infrastructure things that will help us to even have greater progress in the future. John, did you want to add to that?
I think the only other part, that's an important part of the story is what we've used the money for. When we exited bankruptcy, as the mayor indicated, we determined that we needed $275 million. That was before the bankruptcy fee reductions. And I still remember the day that the mayor said to John Hill and myself, he wanted this to be a teachable moment for the staff here at the city that hasn't had money to spend for so long, that he wanted to be careful with this money. So John established a business case rationale that was used. Departments that wanted to have access to this money to improve service delivery wrote a business case. So you're already seeing it out on the street. This is money that's been used to improve our fire department fleet, the police fleet. You can't drive around town without seeing the improvements in our police fleet. As John indicated, we're using a portion of it to redesign the financial reporting system. So the money was really put to very, very good use and in a very disciplined approach, so that in future years, our department heads will make a business case to spend money just like they would in the for-profit sector.
How much has been spent, can you say?
Only a small portion of this was used to settle debts during the bankruptcy. You'll recall that we had these interest rate swaps that were tied to a former financing that was done by the city. Those were settled at a much reduced rate through the bankruptcy, but the remaining $200 million of this $245 million are what we call quality of life spending. If you follow City Council, you see City Council following this money, analyzing how it's being spent, and we're very proud of how responsibly our department heads are putting this money to use.
Did the vote on the water rates impact this?
These guys were in the conversation, but there is no doubt, had we been running a deficit in the water system, it would have had a significant negative effect. So I want to thank the council members who fixed that deficit. And maybe John or John, you were in the conversation with the rating agencies at the time. You can talk about the impact.
Yeah. It was definitely an issue that was brought up by the rating agency as we were going through that process. We do believe that we would not have the rating that we have if that issue had not been resolved positively. So I would echo the mayor's thanks to the council for doing what was needed in order to show that we were willing to make tough decisions to help the financial stability of the city.